Hello music fans, welcome to the Death by Unicorn channel for another episode of What's New 2023, where I talk about new albums that came out over the past week in metal, rock, and prog. Today I'm going to talk about 8 albums, one that came out on September 4th and the other 7 that came out on September 7th, and give you my first impressions of them. And for 7 of these 8 bands, this is my first time listening to an album of theirs in full. And for one of them, I've listened to albums by them before. So a lot of this is just also my first impression of these bands. And I'll talk about them in my order of preference, starting with my favorite, which is Southern Empire, and their album Another World. This is progressive rock. It's got a little bit of metal influences in there as well. It's the third album by this Australian band, and there's actually been a trio of albums from a family of Australian bands. Unitopia is one of the bands, and then it kind of split into 2 bands, which are Southern Empire and United Progressive Fraternity, but now Unitopia has gotten back together. And I think my favorite of the 3 this year would be Unitopia, but then my second favorite would be Southern Empire, my third favorite would be United Progressive Fraternity. But they're all good. This one's great by Southern Empire. Really solid album from start to finish. Has some nice variety, ranging from really proggy songs, fun songs. There's a soft emotional ballad called Hold On To Me, which was one of the early release singles, and almost sounds a bit Jesus-y to me on that song. They don't say the word Jesus or Christ or anything like that in the song. I don't think. It just has that vibe, but it's still a really good song, even though I'm not usually into that vibe. And there's even a 19-minute prog epic called White Shadows. That's just to name a few of the songs. Next up, my next favorite is from September 7th, and it's called The Mercury Tree. That's the band. The Mercury Tree is the name of the band. The album is called Self-Similar, and this is psychedelic progressive rock with some math rock influences. And this is the 6th album by this American band, and they use microtonal tunings on their guitars. So if you're a fan of King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, and in particular their microtonal tuning albums, this will be another great album for you to check out. I haven't heard too many bands doing this style, so those are really the only 2 that I've heard playing with these microtonal guitars. Maybe a couple others. But the vocals on here remind me of Tom York from Radiohead. But there's even a moment on the title track, Self-Similar, where they let out a scream, and it almost sounded like a mathcore section. We got some like time signature changes going on. I'm really curious to hear this band's earlier work and hear if everything they do is microtonal or if it's just this album. So I'm going to check out more from the Mercury Tree going forward. I really like what they did with the microtones on this, but my ears can only take so much microtonal stuff, and then I'm used to Western ears, so I'd be curious to hear what they can do while staying confined to the 12 notes we have in Western music, and leaning less on that dissonance that comes from the microtones, which can be hard on the ears when they're just used to the Western music notes. Next up, I want to talk about Conquer Divide and their album Slow Burn. This is metalcore with some post-hardcore, emo, and pop influences. It's the 2nd album by this all-female American metalcore band. I heard the single Welcome to Paradise before release, which prompted me to check this out. And this should be good for fans of Spirit Box, Red Handed Denial, and Sordid Pink, previously known as Destiny Potato. The vocals range from being really catchy and poppy sung vocals, especially in the choruses that remind me of Hayley Williams from Paramore, to being intense scream vocals that remind me of Tatiana from Ginger, especially in the breakdown parts. The song structures on this album by Conquer Divide are a little predictable. I could always tell when a breakdown was coming, even on first listen, but I don't think this album is intended to have too many surprises or atypical structures. It's not trying to innovate or be proggy or anything like that. It's just a really catchy metalcore album with powerful female vocals, and it's really well done. Next up is Damage Plan with their album The New Horizon. This is progressive power metal. It's got some melodic death metal, some traditional heavy metal influences. It's the third album by this Finnish band. If you're a fan of bands like Soilwork, In Flames, and Scar Symmetry, imagine taking their clean vocal parts more so than their harsh vocals, as most of this album, if not all of it, is clean sung. There are hints of power metal and traditional heavy metal in here, but there is that influence from melodic death metal riffing. And next up is Sylosis and their album A Sign of Things to Come. This is melodic death metal as well, with some progressive thrash and groove metal influences. It's the sixth album by this English band. For fans of Trivium and Soilwork, imagine combining their sound with Vector and Lamb of God. That's kind of what this reminds me of. And next up is Cryptopsy and their album As Gomorrah Burns. This is technical death metal. It's the eighth album by this Canadian band. It's crushingly brutal and heavy. It's all harsh, growling vocals. There's great technical guitar playing and drumming on here for fans of Archspire and the Faceless, though it doesn't quite go as far on the guitar shredding as those two bands or the speed. It focuses more on just being crushingly heavy. Though there is some fast guitar stuff, but it's not as focused on that as Archspire and the Faceless, but I still like it. And next up is Downs Braide Association, I think also known as DBA. The album's called Celestial Songs. This is progressive rock, and it's the fifth album by this collaborative project between Jeff Downs, who has played with the Buggles, Yes, and Asia, and award-winning songwriter and producer Chris Braide. The whole 67-minute album is pretty much all soft, emotional ballads with some great piano playing and some hints of progginess with some cool guitar licks here and there. But it's almost like more of a pop rock than a prog rock album. But again, like very soft, kind of sappy, emotional pop rock. All the songs are well done and they stand on their own pretty well, but it is a little tiring to listen to this whole album from start to finish because every song has the same vibe. I wish they put a bit more variety on here because I think these guys have great talent for songwriting, performance, and production. Unfortunately, with it the way it is, it's a little boring, but it's still a good album, just not one I'll go back to often, if ever. And last one on my list today is the Flower Kings with Look at You Now. This is progressive rock, the 16th album by this Swedish band. I'm a fan of the guitar work of Roine Stolt in particular, but more so when he works with Transatlantic, a band that I really love. But this is his main band at the moment, but he's worked with many bands over his career. But this, I think if you're a fan of Transatlantic, Yes, Genesis, Spock's Beard, Neil Morse Band, you'll like this. It kind of sounds like a mix of those bands. It's definitely proggy, but it does, however, sound a little safe and samey to the other things that the Flower Kings have done before. This is the one band that I've listened to before on this list that's not as new to me. But yeah, I wish they kind of did something more new or innovative. Longtime fans of the Flower Kings will probably like this, but if you haven't liked their previous stuff, I don't expect you'll like this. I like it, but I just don't love it. I was hoping for something. I'm hoping for them to take some more risks and do something more creative, something more innovative, something more interesting that would keep my attention from start to finish. So decent, but probably won't go back to it often, if ever. And that's it for my first impressions on these 8 new albums that came out over the past week. What do you think of these albums? Are there some other ones that I missed in the metal, rock, and prog world that you recommend? Let me know down in the comments. And until next time, peace out.